Good morning and welcome to worship at First Unitarian Church of Rochester, New York. I invite you now to join us in singing our opening hymn, We Gather Together.
Welcome to Online Church at First Unitarian Church of Rochester. I'm Reverend Sherry, and it is a joy and a pleasure to be with all of you, wherever it is that you happen to be. It's not Sunday morning without all of you, or it's not whenever it is that you happen to be watching or gathering with us online. Leading worship most days with me is Reverend Bob. Tom Snell is our director of music. Arson's on piano. We've got Tim Farnham and Emily Sanjanwala who are helping out with tech. There are lots of people who bring readings and reflections and poetry who help us behind the stage, or behind the scenes rather, using technology to make our gathering possible. And then there's everything else we do throughout the week. Here at First Unitarian, our mission is through spiritual connection in community. We listen deeply to others and ourselves. We open to wonder and transformation. And we serve together with love and humility. Thank you for being with us now. Our work and witness begins together as we center ourselves and light our chalice with the unison words that we use every week here at First Unitarian. May the flame we now kindle inspire us to use our power to heal with love, to help with compassion, to bless with joy, and to seek liberation in the fullness of community. We'll have a little bit of music, and since we're able to engage with our chat, I'd love to know how many of you are gathering for worship with either someone you live with or a pet or a plant. Let us know who's on. One of the things we've realized in moving to worship online is it's almost impossible for us to know how many people or how many creatures are joining with us. So this is very unscientific, but we'd love to know, how is it and with whom are you joining us today?
I've always hated making phone calls. I'm not talking about just calling up a friend, but the kind that are for work or for business or maybe for an organization. Calling somebody I'm not familiar with or don't know at all, and maybe asking them to volunteer or, heaven forfend, give money. And when I was in the working world a long time ago, that was BI, before internet, I was a big fan of the interoffice memo. And then we got fax. That was great. Emails, now text messages, Facebook messages. You know, it's the kind of thing like if my husband and I wonder if a restaurant's open, he'll just pick up the phone. I always go to the internet and just check their website to see what the hours are. So I was a little surprised when I found myself actually volunteering to make phone calls to people I don't know through the Caring Steward program here. So I got my list and I sat down with my phone and I thought, you know, Lynette, just put on your big girl pants and call people up. So I did. The first call was pretty hard. And then I talked to some wonderful people. I'm lucky enough to have many of our elders on my list. And I've heard stories about the church that go back to when the church moved. I found out about people's families, about who's in the memorial book, who's memorialized in the garden. And it's just been delightful. And so now I'm I look forward to making those phone calls and finding out how everybody's doing. And that's why we come to church, because here we're given opportunities or even pushed into getting outside our comfort zone, trying different things and making connections. That's why I come to church, and I think we all do.
Thank you, Lynette. This idea of connecting with each other in unexpected ways is a huge part of why many of us come to church. And one of the joys that I have as one of the leaders of this congregation is connecting with my colleague in ministry, Reverend Bob. Each month we tackle a topic for a month of worship, and Tommy does an incredible job finding music to support the message each week. And often I find that after Bob has delivered a message, my thought process changes. It shifts. Last week, Bob shared a quote from Nelson Mandela, one that he writes in his Long Walk to Freedom memoir, and talks about the secret that he discovers upon struggling through one personal obstacle, overcoming one personal obstacle, overcoming one struggle in a wider justice community. And the secret that he discovers is that upon surmounting or summiting one large hill, you discover that there are many other hills to climb, mountains beyond mountains. And this is true for those of us who struggle in our own lives to get through a day. It's true for those who are incredibly community-minded, seeking to create and foster conditions of equity and justice in the wider world. There are mountains beyond mountains. And in thinking about this, over the last 10 days or so, when Bob first shared that quote with me, and thinking about our monthly theme of overcoming obstacles, my thoughts turned to the summer and how many of us, even if we can't travel more widely, might be taking long walks, hikes even. Some of us might gather with backpacks and truly try to summit some mountains. And so today I take up the topic of what are some of the tools we might have in our backpack? What are some of the spiritual tools that we refine and develop and maybe even discover that we've had all along, first here in this religious community? Like every journey, whether that's interior or to climb a mountain, you need the basics. You need food and water and sleep. And so those who are right now struggling to overcome obstacles to get through today or to foster conditions of equity and justice in the wider community, the basics of food and water and shelter and sleep must be taken care of. But beyond that, what are the tools that we have? Lynette will share a reading, a poem. Here in Unitarian Universalist circles, we turn to poetry frequently as one of our spiritual tools.
Things to Think by Robert Bly. Think in ways you've never thought before. If the phone rings, think of it as carrying a message larger than anything you've ever heard, vaster than 100 lines of Yeats. Think that someone may bring a bear to your door, may be wounded and deranged. Or think that a moose has risen out of the lake and he's carrying on his antlers a child of your own whom you've never seen. When someone knocks on the door, think that he's about to give you something large, tell you you're forgiven, or that it's not necessary to work all the time, or that it's been decided that if you lie down, no one will die.
Robert Bly so casually asked all of us to imagine that each time we open the door or pick up the phone, a moose bearing the child we didn't know that we had comes to greet us. That is a wild ask, Robert, a wild recommendation for how we approach life. And yet this is the first tool that I think we have in our spiritual backpack. Perhaps not expecting a moose exactly, but a backpack, as anyone who goes far distances with heavy weight knows, is best designed if it has straps to help you be ready to bear a heavy burden. Hip straps distribute the weight so that even if you have just a sandwich in your bag, you might stand so that the weight of the backpack is not purely on your shoulders. This becomes all more important if you add a moose or heartache, a breakup, grief, anger. Having a posture of readiness and a way to distribute the weight, a way to stand so that no matter what happens, no matter what gets put into your backpack, you might be able to move through slowly but surely. Years ago, when I was preparing to live abroad, I was given lots of advice. Some of it good, some of it not good. But some of the best advice that I received was to find a moment of bliss each day. Now, bliss is a word that's gone in many circles sort of out of trend, let's say. It sounds like something you might pick up on sale at Target or something you could never afford that has its own ranch somewhere. But a moment of joy, a moment of delight. Find a moment of bliss each day. Some days it was easy.
A gorgeous flower or bird that I had never seen before would cross my path. A neighbor would come bearing some sort of treat they wanted to share. I would finally be able to carry the water that I needed to get from the well without stumbling. Some days the moments of bliss came rushing out, and it was hard to pick just one, which was fine because that was never the goal. But other days it was harder. I woke up grumpy. And so perhaps that same bird or that same animal would cross my path, but I was less ready for it. Or it was a gray day, raining like it is now, and no neighbors would come because people didn't like to go out in the rain or it wasn't safe. And so to challenge myself to find a moment of bliss each day wasn't, on the grand scheme of things, a particularly difficult task, but it was something that required discipline, a certain rigor of expectation that I would do it each and every day. It was, when I think on it, my very first spiritual practice that I stuck to even a little bit. Over the first few decades of my life, I would try in fits and starts to meditate or journal or sing, but I could never quite stick with it. But finding a moment of bliss each day while I lived overseas was the first spiritual practice that I did, to be quite honest, not every day, but most days. And that I tried with intention to pay attention to this practice. Spiritual practice is one of the things that we do collectively each Sunday. Coming to church is a spiritual practice. I hope that doesn't ruin it for anyone. But it's something we also encourage and support each other in finding in our personal lives, individually, on our own. We take up spiritual practices each day, not because if we miss one day, the world will crumble, but like papers, we lie on top of each other. When you miss 1 or 2 days, the stack difference is not discernible. But after a year of missing every other day, your ream is suddenly cut short. The rigor and discipline of an action that you enjoy most of the time, but have to force yourself or invite yourself really to do, is one of the spiritual tools that we also have in our backpacks. It's a spiritual tool that requires refining, requires care. And it's one that here in community, we can support and encourage each other in the practice of. And so if I offer 3 spiritual tools in our backpack, we've got 2 so far, hip straps and a posture of readiness, and 2, spiritual practice. We'll get to the 3rd later. I want us collectively to participate in 3 spiritual practices. Again, like coming to church, I hope it doesn't ruin it for you. None of these things will be new to you. But first we engage in settling into our bodies and sharing silence. So I invite you, if your feet touch the floor, to place your feet squarely. Whatever part of your body is resting upon what grounds you in the earth, settle into that. Settle in, and if your eyes want to lower or even close, do so. Let us share just a minute of silence. The practice of silence has many purposes, and it depends on who you ask. I'll let you deepen into your relationship with silence. But I will admit, for me, it is one of the places that invites me to be still. It is a rarity for me. And it is one of the places where I, in no way, can be conversationally dominant, which is a spiritual practice for me. Most weeks, we engage also in a collective spiritual practice of prayer. Earlier this week, at the prompting of a few members who reached out about prayer saying, what is it anyway? Should I be doing it? And can I really, with any sort of honesty? I spoke with some of you who gathered at our noontime connection, and we talked about Anne Lamott's effective yet wildly simple formula for prayer. The writer and liberal Christian Anne Lamott, she disposes of any form of address. It's not really the point. And for those of us who are non-theists, it simplifies the practice. Ms. Lamott writes that there are really only 3 prayers in life: help, thanks, and wow. I like to take them in a different order because, quite frankly, I think help requires a little bit bigger of an ask of our hearts. I don't mean to generalize, but Unitarian Universalists often think of ourselves as quite capable, independent humans, and we are. So asking for help or acknowledging that we might not be able to do all that we wish to do alone is a challenging ask. Gratitude, though, gratitude is a practice that is one of our easiest and most exuberant communal and collective practices. And so I invite you into the chat to type in what you might say thanks for. I begin my prayers often with this opening: Spirit of life, source of endings and beginnings, God of many names and one abundant love. We give thanks for the people that we love, thanks for our health, thanks for Zoom time with our families and this treasured community. Thank you for good health, even when there are challenges. Thank you for all the healthcare workers who are caring for those with COVID. Thank you for all the healthcare workers who are caring for those with other health issues of mind, body, and spirit. Thank you for a safe place to live, for school, for our spouses, for our parents, for furry friends gifted from others in the church community, for love, and for the cardinals waiting just outside. Thank you for the internet and for power, and for time away from the internet and power. Thank you for the persistence of nature and opportunities to connect with it. For all these things and so much more, and for the gift of life itself, we give thanks. We turn our attention to the big wow, a sense of awe that is inspired by all of the things that we are grateful for, but also that extends beyond any one individual piece of that puzzle. For those who are offering gratitude in the chat, continue to do so. It is an unending prayer. But I invite you also, even if you've already shared, to share also what brings you to awe right now? What opens you to wonder and transformation? There are so many things. Children and nature and spring and bunnies and connection and silence and sound and music and children and the stories from the elder tree. Facebook and love and cat and sunshine. All of these turn our hearts and open us to awe. And we ask also for help. Where in our lives might help be needed? What in our own practice could we use help with in our own lives? Where do we need help otherwise? I've turned off the chat. It looks like some of the disruption that we experienced earlier today may continue. And so I ask for help for the ways that we exist in community and the ways that we reach out in connection are not simple. We ask for help in supporting those who reach out for connection, reach out knowing that what they do impacts others, reaching out knowing that our words can cause harm, our words can bring love, knowing that all of the ways in which we are in relationship change how we live. I ask for help with compassion for those with whom I disagree, help for those whose decisions I believe put at risk the lives and health of people I love. I ask for help and hold in love all those who worry about their finances, who worry about their ability to take care of their families, all those driven to the streets, all those driven to stay home. I pray that all of us might be held in a web of love that allows us to listen deeply to others, to know that our actions have impact, and that we are transformed by a love that allows us to transform the world. May it be so. Amen. We pray most weeks we are together. And every week we are together. We sing. Singing too is a spiritual practice that we take up collectively and that I hope and invite each of you to take up individually. Tommy will lead us in a meditative hymn, something that I like to think of something that I put in my pocket and carry around with me for when I need it, for when someone else might need it, or for when I just might want it and not need it at all.
In the stillness of this moment, there is peace. There is peace. In the stillness of this moment, there is peace. There is peace, and I rest and trust and breathe and know that in the stillness of this moment there is peace.
Please join me now in singing In the Stillness of This Moment, There is Peace.
In the stillness of this moment there is peace. There is peace. In the stillness of this moment there is peace. There is peace, and I rest and trust and breathe and know that in the stillness of this moment there is peace. In the stillness of this moment there is peace. There is peace. In the stillness of this moment there is peace. There is peace, and I rest and trust and breathe and know that in the stillness of this moment there is peace. In the stillness of this moment there is peace. There is peace. In the stillness of this moment there is peace. There is peace, and I rest and trust and breathe and know that in the stillness of this moment there is peace.
That first spiritual practice lined me up well for what I think is our third spiritual tool, and perhaps not to abandon all humility, but perhaps for me, one of the spiritual gifts that I've spent the most amount of time developing. That same person who told me to find a moment of bliss each day, that same person who gave on the whole good advice when there was lots of bad advice, advised also that when packing for a long trip, especially if you think it might be difficult, so when preparing, separate your items into 3 piles. The first is everything that you absolutely think you need. The second are the things you think you probably need, the things that would be a good idea, the practical things, but not the absolute necessities. And the third pile is full of the fun things that you know you don't need but would make you happy or help you along the way, things that would revive your spirit, things that will allow you to connect and delight, things that are playful. Assuming you are going somewhere where your basic needs, food and water and shelter and sleep, assuming that all 3 of those things you already have into your backpack, and indeed our spiritual backpacks, take half of the first pile. Take half of the things that you absolutely know that you need, only half. And all the things you think you should bring, take none of that. Fill the backpack instead having had some of your necessities, with as much of the third pile as you care to carry. Bring as much of a sense of play and delight and connection as you possibly can. For all of us, this takes different forms. For some, it means games. For some, it means humor. For others, it involves simply cultivating beauty or engaging in pursuits of creativity. But a sense of play and delight that says yes to life, says yes to the invitation to be life's dance partner, is our third spiritual tool. And Lynette, our worship associate for today, as we were talking about this service, talked about the wonderful practice that she has delighted in on the internet in recent weeks, where people set out to recreate iconic works of art, fine art in museums where they can no longer walk the hallways and see what is on the wall, but instead can look up online and then recreate in their own home with, instead of a skull, maybe a dumpling, or instead of a luxurious regal robe that one might wear in their portrait, they put their cat on their shoulders. People all over are recreating iconic works of art. And I will say, one of the places that I miss walking the halls, moving around and seeing the walls, one of the pieces of fine art that I miss right now is our church building. The place we used to call our church before we really truly discovered in our hearts that the church was the people and not the building. But that iconic building designed by Louis Kahn that combines concrete and wood, combines man-made with the natural world, that invites our spirit to soar, to not be limited by designs of images and scenes that box us in too much. Our building is no doubt a piece of, oh, I mean, of course, it looks like this. Are you all seeing it? There's something about my Zoom controls. Lynette, give me a thumbs up if you're seeing our building. This is what this fine art looks like, of course. So I recreated it. That's me holding my coffee table. A sense of play and delight is one of the things in our spiritual backpack that allows us to move through difficult times. I am seeing instructions to share my screen again. Apparently people didn't get enough of the joy of me holding my coffee table and wearing all gray. But like all funny things and all delights, part of their magic is in their impermanence. And so you're stuck with my face again, stuck with each other, but equipped both to climb this long hill, equipped to overcome this particular obstacle and many others with these three spiritual tools. Of course, we have many tools in our spiritual backpacks, but today I offer only three: a posture of readiness, spiritual practice, both in community and individually, and a sense of play and delight. These hills we climb, they're both individual and collective, but with these skills, we will face these challenges, hill after hill. May it be so. I guess we're all on an adventure together. That was a delight. Thank you, Arson. Thank you, Tommy, for selecting that. We engage each week not only in the spiritual practices of silence and prayer, meditation, centering, and song, but also in the spiritual practice of generosity. We take an offering each week, even those of us who regularly support the church through a pledge. We make it a practice to give so that giving and generosity, upon discerning that we're able and that we can, and that it will not harm our families or ourselves, is a way for us to demonstrate our interdependence, our connection with the wider world. And here, during this time of worshiping online, we've shifted our offering practice from every other week to a community organization to now splitting our plate each and every week. And so I invite you into the spiritual practice of giving to our church and 540 West Main. And 540 West Main is a community organization here in Rochester. We return to organizations not only who are doing acute crisis work right now, but also the community organizations and the organizations in our wider world that align with our mission and values and do good work. And so I invite you to give generously as you are able. And I invite you also each and every week to sing loudly. I invite you into the spiritual practice of singing with Tommy and with me, and even if badly, because hitting the right notes is hardly ever the point in spiritual practice. Invite you to sing our closing hymn.
Please join me now in singing Sing Out Praises for the Journey.
Sing out praises for the journey, pilgrims we who carry on. Searchers in the soul's deep yearnings, like our forebears in their time. We seek out the Spirit's wholeness in the endless human quest. Look inside your souls, the kindling of the heart fire pilgrims new. Find the Spirit always restless, find it in each mind and heart. Touch and hold that ancient yearning, kindling for a new-found faith. Stand we now upon the threshold, facing futures yet unknown. Earth behind us, wayside hostel, built by those who knew wild roads. Guard we ere their sacred embers, buried in our minds and hearts.
One of the joys of being muted while singing together is not only do you not have to hit the right notes, but even if you say heart instead of hearth every time, that's okay too. For those who know wild roads, for those who loved us into being, for those who wait to see who we as ancestors will prove to be. May we guard these sacred embers. May we know that the tools that we need, that everything we will need for this journey are already in our backpack. May we travel this great hill, and let us extinguish our chalice with unison words together. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, or the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. May we stay exactly where we are meant to be. Stay in peace. Go in courage and love and power, wherever it is that you are.